Lead smelters, ghillie suits, air rifles, and more this week on Mail Call Mondays. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. We're here on another Monday, and our first question right off the bat comes from John. John asks, I read in the paper the last U.S. lead smelter is shutting down due to pressure from increasingly stringent demands from the EPA. It's been alleged that this form of backdoor gun control, as new lead will have to be imported, the most likely source being from China. Have you heard this, and how do you think ammunition prices and availability will be affected? How do you see the civilian firearms / ammo market changing in the next 5 to 10 years? Well, John, in short, I don't see the ammunition market changing in the next 5 to 10 years due to this smelter closing. When I did a little research, and we actually put a short article up on our website at 8541tactical.com, the smelter that is being closed is a primary smelter. It takes the ore out of the ground and it turns it into lead that's usable for commercial ventures. Approximately 80% of the lead that comes out of these smelters is used for batteries. Out of the battery production, something like 95% of the battery production in the U.S., or batteries produced in the U.S., are recycled. Now, the lead that we use in our bullets, commercial ammunition, accounts for approximately 3% of the lead use in the U.S. And after checking on Sierra's website and Federal's website, for instance, the lead that Sierra uses in the production of their match bullets is actually recycled lead that they get from several different sources. So that recycled lead supply, because we are recycling 95% of battery usage, is going to continue for quite some time. What we may end up seeing until new plants are able to be built that comply with the EPA standards, we may see the lead for our batteries being imported from China, but I can pretty much guarantee you that they're going to be hot and heavy on that, because most of us drive cars that use lead batteries in them. We have lead batteries in a variety of appliances and things that we use on a daily basis. So any decline in that is going to meet with sharp resistance from the public, and I can bet the politicians will be on it pretty quickly. The lead that we use for commercial shooting or for recreational shooting is a very, very small portion of the overall lead usage, and since it uses recycled lead that's already in the country, shutting down lead being imported from China or other countries outside the borders really aren't going to affect us all that much. Now, what I would like to see, though, is I would like to see ammunition manufacturers start to experiment with alternatives to lead. First of all, due to the environmental concerns of lead, due to what it does to our bodies. Those of us that shoot for any amount of time, or are professional shooters or professional firearms instructors, would do well to get our lead levels checked on a regular basis. As part of my occupation, it's a requirement. I have to have my lead levels checked to make sure that I'm not ingesting too much lead in my body and that it doesn't build up to lethal levels. So if we were able to switch to something that is a little bit more environmentally friendly, both to the environment at large and to ourselves, I think it would be a great benefit to everybody. So hopefully ammunition manufacturers will start to head in that direction. Now, if for some reason we were no longer able to use lead in projectiles, then there are companies like Barnes that have been doing a lot with copper solid bullets. So it's not like the lack of lead would shut down the firearms industry, period. I don't believe that this is any kind of backdoor gun control. I think it's just the EPA doing what the EPA does and being super strict on some things. I am not an expert on air quality and how much pollution lead smelters put out, so I can't tell you if this is really unwarranted or if this is something that really was necessary to protect our environment. That I will leave to those experts, and you can probably do some research on the internet and find that out yourself if you really desire to do so. But in the short term, it shouldn't really affect us. There is a ton of recyclable lead that is out there that can still be used to produce bullets. So short term, no real effects. Long term, we may see some effects if new lead smelters don't come online. Jason asks, when making a ghillie suit, do you prefer a flight suit or Cammies? Well, Jason, I actually had this discussion with a guy at work not too long ago who's wanting to build a ghillie suit just mainly for the experience of building it, but also for some hunting. And what I recommended to him is to make sure that you use a hat, a blouse, and pants combination. The reason for that is it gives you a ton of versatility when you're building a ghillie suit. If you use something like a flight suit that is all one piece, then you don't have the ability to select top or bottoms based upon the situation. If you try to go something like a smock that has a hood on it, now you're locked in. You have to have that hood attached. You can't use the hood without the smock. So what we generally recommended in my old sniper platoon when we were building ghillie suits is that you use a boonie hat or an old BDU utility hat, and then a blouse and utility bottoms. What my ghillie suit that is still in good working order is made from is an old mop suit. That's a field protective suit. We took one of the really old ones. They have charcoal liners in them and they're made with a fairly heavy duty material. We cut the charcoal liners out and then sew netting to it and then put the garnish and the jute on the netting. This gives you a really durable piece, and you can turn the blouse around when you get into a firing position and have all that garnish and jute facing towards your target. If you are running just a flight suit, it's much more difficult to take that whole thing off and then turn it around. Additionally, there were quite a few times when we go to the field where we wouldn't bring a full ghillie suit. You would just basically bring your veil, and the veil is just the top portion of the ghillie. And if you were running something with a hood, then you don't have that ability. So I definitely recommend separate pieces and putting it together from that. As far as the details, there are as many different ways to make a ghillie suit as there are professional snipers. So it's going to be something where you do some research. We may do a short video later on about my old ghillie suit and how I put it together and why I did what I did. But do some research online. There are a bunch of different guys that are out there putting them together, and there's a ton of good info that is already out there. So if you guys want to hear information on my ghillie suit and how I put it together, go ahead and leave a request in the comments below, and if we get a lot of interest, we may go ahead and do that. Ken asks, hey John, I'm looking at getting an auto powder dispenser. What do you think about the RCBS Charge Master combo versus the Hornady Lock and Load Auto Charge Powder Dispenser versus the Lyman Gen 5 Digital Powder System? Thanks and keep up the great work. Well, Ken, I'm sure you've seen our reloading videos, and if you look over my shoulder right back here, you'll see that we have two RCBS Charge Master 1500s set up. And those Charge Masters have worked very, very well. There is some initial setup. We have done a video and article on reprogramming the Charge Master, and I'll leave that information in the description below. We reprogram it to get a little bit more speed and a little bit more accuracy out of it, but once they're reprogrammed and you do the McDonald's straw mod, the RCBS Charge Master 1500s work very, very well. Now, the other two powder dispensers that you've mentioned, I have not personally used, but when I purchased my Charge Masters, I did a lot of research. I actually bought one Charge Master after doing a ton of research, decided that that was the best option currently, and then after using that Charge Master for quite some time, I had a friend that was trying to get rid of his Charge Master because it didn't work for the type of shooting that he was doing, and bought that, and so I added the second one to our setup. And running two Charge Masters in parallel work very, very well. What I do is I set both Charge Masters to dispense the same amount of powder, and they're both programmed the same way. So I will set them on auto dispense. Both of them will dispense initially. When I pull the powder from the one and dump it and place that back, it will start dispensing. When I get done seating my cartridge and I go back, The second one has a charge waiting for me, and I'll dump. And by the time I dump, seat a bullet, and get ready to go, one of the two charge masters will have a full charge ready to go. So 2 charge masters will allow me to load as fast as I can dump powder and seat the bullet, which works out really well for precision rifle reloading. So I know it's kind of a non-answer. I can tell you, if you go with the charge master, it's going to work very well. They're very accurate. With the reprogramming, you will get an overthrow occasionally, but with some experience, it's very simple to know that if you get a 1/10 grain overflow, just to kick out a couple of kernels of powder, depending upon what powder you're using, and it'll be right on. So the Chargemaster 1500 has just worked really well for us. David asks, how do you determine height sight over bore for ballistic calculations? Well, the sight height is basically the difference in the axis of the bore and the axis of the scope. And you can do this a couple of different ways. If you're using standard rings on, for instance, a Remington 700 receiver, then you can go to the gas exit hole on the right side of the receiver, measure from that hole to the split in your rings, and that will give you a very, very close approximation of your sight height. If you're shooting a system that does not have a gas exit hole right in the center of the axis like the Remington does, or no exit hole at all, then just eyeball where the center of your bore is and the center of your scope and measure that distance. So all you're measuring is center of the bore to center of the scope, and plug that in. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but getting it close is preferable. If you're half an inch off, then it may have some effect on your ballistics inside your zero range, and that's the big deal on the sight height, is it really has an effect. If you zero your rifle at 100 yards, it has a great effect from, for instance, 50 yards and in. It'll really affect what your setting is. But beyond 100, 200 yards, then the sight height starts to get lost in the other variables. So do a good job of measuring it, don't obsess over it. Sam asks, if I don't have access to a chronograph, is there any way to get an idea what my muzzle velocity is? Well, Sam, if you have a ballistic computer like Bullet Flight or Ballistic AE specifically, if you have Ballistic AE, then what you can do is you can estimate your muzzle velocity to start off with. So, for instance, if you're shooting M118 LR, just punch in 2600 foot per second or 2550 for your muzzle velocity. Then go out and shoot at varying different yard ranges on a very large target. For instance, shoot 300, 500, 700, 800, and then write down how many or how far off your point of aim that impact is. Then you can go back into the ballistic computer and you can plug in what that offset is, and the ballistic computer will back into your muzzle velocity. As long as your variables that you're plugging into it, with the exception of the muzzle velocity, are as accurate as you can possibly get, then it can back into a muzzle velocity fairly accurately. And that really is going to be your best way to do it without a chronograph. It's really the only way that I'm aware of to do it with any kind of reliability. A good chronograph is going to be your best bet though, and what I highly suggest, just to save yourself some ammo and to save yourself some trouble, find a buddy that you can go out with and shoot over his chronograph a little bit, and you'll be really close. And then you can still go through the truing if you want, but you know where you're starting from and you're going to be good to go. Now, if you decide to do this, it is really critical that you pick a bullet or a cartridge that you have a good ballistic coefficient on, because if your ballistic coefficient is off and your muzzle velocity is off, it's just going to be all over the place trying to get everything dialed back in. Matthew asks, TAC-21 update, something, anything? And Joe asks, reviews on both the MDT chassis. Well, we are currently finishing up the review on the LSS chassis, and the TAC-21 will be going right after that. So we are working on those. We should have the LSS review out very soon. We took it out, we did some barricade shooting with it like you guys requested. The chassis worked very, very well. I didn't have any problems shooting over an improvised barricade, which was just basically a chair that we turned around backwards. And it worked great. I was really happy with the results on the chassis, but there are some little tiny things that we'll discuss in the review that you guys may be interested in. But overall, if you're really jonesing to buy one, I don't think you're going to be disappointed with it. Andrew asks, what's the best way to free up a sticky action? Just bought a Remington 700 AAC SD. Passes go, no go, but action is still difficult to cycle after 100 rounds. Thanks. Well, Andrew, it depends on what you're considering sticky. If you're just talking about cycling the action, closing it down, and then opening it back up and pulling the bolt back on an unfired case or on an empty chamber, then that's just going to come from cleaning the action, lubing it up, and then just repeatedly running it over and over and over again. Tons of dry fire time is really the best way to smooth that bolt out and smooth that action up. Now, if you are talking about when you fire a cartridge, you're having a really hard time lifting that bolt, that's generally what's referred to as a sticky bolt, then you may be experiencing some pressure issues. Even if the thing is passing a go, no-go gauge, there may be some other problems either in the throat of the chamber or in the neck that a go or no-go gauge will not show. So if you're really getting sticky bolt lifts on relatively low charges and factory ammunition, then it may be a good idea to either contact a gunsmith and have him look at it, or have the rifle sent back to Remington and have them check it out. So sticky bolt, get that checked out. If it's just not as smooth as you'd like, it's a little bit gritty, then do a whole lot of dry fire and really resist the urge to polish anything or get in there, put lapping compound or anything in there, because if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you can turn that action into really a sloppy mess really quickly. Austin asks, since many of us are forced to schedule our days around our occupations and families, what's your opinion on air rifle training? Might be the only trigger time one can get inside city limits, and air rifles can take you to 100 yards if you have the room. Would love to hear your thoughts on this training method and what you would recommend. As always, thank you for dedicating your time to the channel and good shooting. Well, Austin, absolutely, air rifles can be a great option if you can't get out to a regular rifle range. Pretty much anything that requires you to execute the fundamentals of marksmanship, breathing, sight alignment, trigger pull, shooting position, muscular relaxation, all that fun stuff. Anything that combines all that together is going to be a good training aid. Now, the key thing is, though, if you're going to use an air rifle for practice, you want to shoot that air rifle as closely as the way you would shoot your regular high power rifle as possible. So you don't want to go out, grab your air rifle and just start blasting away, because that will actually instill bad habits and reinforce bad habits in you. So make sure you get into a good stable position. Try to set up the air rifle as closely to the way that your primary rifle is set up. And by that I mean, if the stock has a certain length of pull, put that on there, a certain comb height, put that on there. If you use a certain kind of bipod, then maybe make it so that you can pull that bipod off of your primary rifle and put it on the air rifle. If you have the ability to get a scope with a similar reticle, that may be a good idea, but that's not exactly critical. The big thing is you want that rifle to feel fairly close to the way your primary rifle is, and you want to practice that good trigger pull, that breathing, the muscular relaxation, the good follow through. So make sure that you are practicing appropriately, and you can get a whole lot out of air rifle training. Our last question of the week comes from Samuel. Samuel asks, I asked this in the MCM Facebook post last week, but I figured I would post it here as well. So with the semi-auto precision rifle being more popular and widely accepted, are we going to start seeing more competitions start to include gas guns as well, even if they're in their own class? I know that most out there are still bolt only. Well, Samuel, most of the competitions that I shoot in don't have any prohibitions against semi-automatic rifles. You just really don't see a lot of them out there because they really still give up just a slight accuracy edge to bolt guns. That and most stages of fire in these matches don't give any advantage to a fast firing semi-auto. You can get the rate of fire high enough with a bolt gun that it negates the advantage. Now there are a few stages in some of the matches I've shot in where a gas gun would have been an advantage, but they usually also mix in some close range surgical stages that would in turn negate the advantage. And then when you turn around and you look at it, a lot of the calibers that we're shooting, 260s, 243s, various different 6mm, 6.5mm chamberings, are not really long barrel life cartridges. They burn out those barrels pretty quick. So you're going to be swapping barrels on a semi-automatic system fairly quickly as well, and that may add a little bit more cost to the whole system overall. But if you've got a supremely accurate semi-automatic rifle, there are a ton of matches right now where you can take that rifle out and go ahead and shoot it. It just is one of those where the top running guys are depending upon that razor's edge of accuracy to give them the win. Now, there are some guys that you'll see at matches occasionally. I know George Gardner has run a 6mm gas gun at one of the previous large matches. I wasn't there at that match, but I've got a couple of friends that love telling the story about him just dumping a magazine down range on one of the stages. So there are guys that are out there and doing it. We just don't see a whole lot of them because there is still an accuracy advantage with the average bolt gun compared to the average gas gun. So if you want to change it, get out there and shoot it. Just make sure you read the rules for the competitions and make sure that they don't throw anything in there that's prohibiting them. But so far, most of the matches that I've been in have not restricted gas guns from the field. That's all we have for this Mail Call Mondays. If you guys have liked the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you got any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below or send them to Facebook and Twitter. We still have a bunch of videos in the works. We are finishing up the LSS video, as I mentioned earlier, so we'll get that video on that chassis out and get switched over and start working on the MDT TAC-21 chassis. We have not dropped the skills videos. We just need to get some good weather to get out and shoot some more of our skills videos. And we have some other little things that are in the works. Make sure you guys are checking our website on a regular basis, 8541tactical.com. We have the blog up and running on there, and I will post articles from time to time. Sometimes they're just slight blurbs about news in the industry. Sometimes they're more detailed reviews. And when we run a review video, we're trying to actually publish a blog review as well, so there may be a little bit more details, some better pictures in the blog review than what you get right here in our videos. That's all we have. Until next week, get out and shoot!